And we are live, guys. Mile high hello and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. My name is Lance Sanderson. I am your host as always, and joining me as usual is my good friend and colleague. He is your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, Erick Trickel. Erick, what's going on, man? How are we doing today?
Doing actually pretty well. I was watching some of the XFL games a little bit this morning and just enjoying it. It's a nice, different change of pace, I would say, compared to NFL. And it's just interesting to watch. Some of the new rule changes. Finally got to see one of those 3-point plays that they have in it, and it didn't work out. But there's a lot of stuff that's interesting. And there's a couple players that I think that NFL teams are going to be eyeing for, just bottom of the depth chart kind of things, letting them see if they can come in and compete. Kind of like with the Broncos bringing in Devontae Bosby and Mike Purcell far exceeding expectations, of course. So definitely a bunch of players like that always stand out a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't actually got a chance to watch any of the XFL stuff. I've seen just a couple of highlights and whatnot. Obviously, Marquette King last week with the booming punts, it's kind of just leaves a bad taste in Broncos country's mouth just with the struggles that Colby Wadman had. But, I mean, I really haven't seen a whole lot of it. I saw the double forward pass deal that Cardale Jones pulled with the DC Defenders. That was kind of a little nifty deal, but I haven't had a chance to do any of that. Today, I really was breaking down a lot of the cornerback tape that I've been able to see so far. I got to watch Bryce Hall, Jeff Gladney, and AJ Terrell, and just a couple of guys, the second round kind of players, just to get started on more of my draft prognosis and whatnot like that. So, but guys, before we get going, just want to remind you all, welcome into Dove Valley Deep Divers Live. Follow the show at DVDD_pod. You can also follow both of us at Sanderson MHH and for Erick at Erick Trickel on Twitter. And today, guys, we're going to break down some of these new mock drafts that we've seen, or some of the most recent mock drafts anyways, from guys at like the NFL.com, Bucky Brooks, Lance Zierlein, Daniel Jeremiah, Chad Reuter. Then we've got one from Jordan Reed as well. And just going to kind of break down the first round for everybody, and kind of, just figure out what excuse me just a second, I'm sorry. Figure out with some of the players that the Broncos are kind of looking at for the first round of the 2020 NFL draft. Now, Erick, to start us off here, I want to kind of break down what Bucky Brooks had put down for us a couple weeks ago. He has the Broncos taking wide receiver T. Higgins from Clemson. Now, obviously, the Broncos are looking for some wide receiver help. They need another guy that can go out and take some of the heat off of Courtland Sutton in the passing game. And hopefully, we're going to see some of Deshaun Hamilton, some Tim Patrick just progress a little bit with what they're able to do. What kind of skill set does T. Higgins bring to this team?
He is a very similar to what Courtland Sutton brings to the table. I mean, a little bit bigger guy, not overly fast, not overly dynamic as a playmaker, and just if Denver needed that kind of a player for it, I think it's typically your X receiver or whatever it is. I can never remember which is which. One of the things that I'm actually can never remember, but he brings that same kind of skill set. And if you're the Broncos, you're looking for complementary skill sets. And I've been preaching this and pounding the table about this for quite a while. Most of my work, my articles, my videos, all that stuff, it's talking about complementary skill sets at the receiver position. And with T. Higgins, basically you're just kind of getting another version of Courtland Sutton. I mean, skill sets are a little different, but not different enough to really make this a good pick. And then you add in that you have Tim Patrick there, who has a similar skill set to them as well. And it's just a bunch of the same skill sets that's not overly diversifying your offense.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that came about with this mock draft was just the fact that Henry Ruggs III, the wide receiver out of Alabama, the speedster guy, the guy that could run, a sub 4.2 at the NFL Combine here the week after, excuse me. He's still available on the board, and he falls. I believe he had him going down to Philadelphia. Now, that's a complementary skill set that I don't think that the Broncos can pass up, especially for a guy like T. Higgins. What do you think?
I definitely agree. I mean, outside of T. Higgins, most of these receivers in the first round, Laviska Shenault, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, all of them bring a more complementary skill set to the Broncos offense than what is currently being brought with what you would be getting with T. Higgins. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, he has that route running ability with some good quickness and speed throughout his routes. You have Laviska Shenault, who just plays the receiver position like a giant running back, basically. You've got CeeDee Lamb, who he's not overly fast, but he runs good routes, and he's just able to contort his body and just make any kind of circus catch, basically. And then, of course, you have Henry Ruggs and the speed that he brings, and not even to mention Jalen Reagor and everything that he brings to the table. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit rough seeing Bucky Brooks, pass up on some of these guys that are more complementary to what the Broncos already have, and going with T. Higgins.
Yeah, and another guy that he has fallen past the Broncos is A.J. Epinesa. And I mean, people look at A.J. Epinesa and they see the edge listed right next to his name. But as far as a player that the Broncos could potentially target, I mean, A.J. Epinesa, like, how do you pass on A.J. Epinesa there?
Well, when I joined the Building the Broncos podcast and we did our top 25 big boards, A.J. Epinesa actually ended up being a guy I was higher on than both Carl and Nick. And the way I look at him is, yeah, he has that edge listing next to his name, but he's more defensive end. He's not a true interior defensive lineman. He's not a true edge. Basically, if you draft him, you're playing him either as a 4-3-7 tech or a 3-4-5 tech. That's basically where you want to be putting him, letting him sub inside, playing that 3 tech, 2-eye technique, and just letting him attack the way through that with his power. And the power that he has in his hands is just astronomically just amazing. And just he's going to cause all sorts of havoc for offenses. So I see a lot of people just like, oh, you can't have him. He's an edge. We don't need an edge. But A.J. Epinesa is not a true edge. He's a defensive end. And this is where those things, those designations of interior defensive line and edge kind of get muddled up. I mean, for the most part, you can put every player into one of those two categories. But with guys like A.J. Epinesa, he's right there in the middle. I think that he is very similar to DeForest Buckner or Justin Smith in what he can bring to the table for the Broncos.
Yeah, and thanks, David, for the comment. We do appreciate you joining up on the show today. And you're absolutely right. And I think that with A.J. Epinesa in this Vic Fangio defense, him playing that that 3 or 5 technique, interior defensive line, getting the pass rush in between Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, that's a pretty dynamic chess piece that you have there. Now, moving forward to the next mock draft we have here, I have Lance Zierlein from NFL.com, and he has the Broncos taking Andrew Thomas, the offensive lineman out of Georgia. Now, with this, I kind of understand where he's going here, and the Broncos definitely need to address the offensive line, maybe not necessarily as far as the tackle goes, and especially with Andrew Thomas, who projects better as a guard. Now, do you think that Andrew Thomas could start at right guard for the Broncos immediately?
I do. I think that if any team that's looking at drafting Andrew Thomas right now is probably looking at moving him either to the right side or inside for his first year. There's a lot of balance issue he has. He'll often get off the snap and he'll get on his heels, which just makes him so easy to bowl over, especially with power rushers. And in the NFL game, speed and power is just tenfold compared to the college level. And he's a good run blocker. So putting him inside where he's going to be able to work in a phone booth a little bit more often, and where the balance issues are still a concern, but the technique that he has is going to help be able to overcome that a little bit more. So I like the pick for the Broncos, but for me, it's as much as I'm a big fan of Andrew Thomas, 15 still seems a little bit early. I mean, just you're looking at him for a interior guy who could eventually move out to tackle, and I get all that stuff, but it's just, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like, I don't know the best way to describe it. It's not a bad pick, but it's not. I think that with how the rest of his mock fell down, I think that they're just better options. And you can go get a guy who can fill that same role that you'd be getting with Thomas probably in the second round.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that Prince Tegawanaga would be a guy like that, but Lucas Niang maybe. Obviously not Josh Jones. We talked about him a couple weeks ago. He's particularly like a tackle-only player. But we do got a super chat coming in here. Paul with a $20 donation. Hey, thank you, Paul. We appreciate it. Nice tie, Eric. I had actually said that as soon as we started and right before we went live. That tie is absolutely beautiful, man. That's awesome. Logan Davis coming in with another super chat here with a $5 donation. Love these live streams. Keep up the great work. Hey, man, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. Mile high salute to you and to all of your loved ones. We do appreciate you guys. Now, to kind of go back to Lance Zierlein's mock draft there, and just as you said, with the way that the mock draft itself had fallen down towards the later end of the first round, a guy that is probably, depending on your flavor, the best wide receiver in the draft, and CeeDee Lamb fell all the way to the Philadelphia Eagles. And, oh, man, I tell you what, that's the complementary skill set receiver that you need to have for Cortland Sutton. CeeDee Lamb to Denver, and they're going to go with a guy that, I mean, projects as a guard, could potentially swing out and play left tackle if the Broncos move on from Garrett Bowles after a couple of years. Now, what do you think, Eric? I don't know, man. You've got CeeDee Lamb, you've got Henry Ruggs going to New Orleans as well. I mean, it's just the whole way that entire first round of his mock draft it was really kind of bitter to me.
It's definitely interesting, and I like the way that that how open that Lance Zierlein is about how he makes his mocks and everything. He's absolutely one of my favorite follows for just the draft in general on Twitter and everything, because he's just very open about it. And I can't remember. I remember hearing his reasoning about why he had CeeDee Lamb so low, but I just can't remember what it was. I can't say I agreed with it, but it was definitely a fresh take, and that's something that you're going to get from him. And trust, don't no argument from me here that these guys, they have much more information than we do that we're able to get and everything, because they are much more locked into what's going on with the draft process and everything than we are. But this is one where I definitely agree that if CeeDee Lamb's there on the board at 15, that the Broncos basically have to rush to the podium.
Now, Rowan Pablo is coming in here. Excuse me if I do mispronounce your name. He says, are you guys higher on Thomas or Becton? Now, that would be Mekhi Becton, the offensive tackle prospect out of Louisville. Big body, big, huge, athletic mover, mountain of a man that can move out in space and is just a mauler, especially in the running game. Now, Eric, this is a question geared more towards you, as I'm still just in the beginning process of me breaking down all these draft prospects. Who do you like better, Mekhi Becton or Andrew Thomas?
Well, it's very much going to depend on the scheme. I think that if you're going to a power or a gap scheme, then Mekhi Becton is definitely the better option there. I do have some questions about his ability for extended movement, especially with lateral movement, to be exact on that, is just very questionable for me, which makes him a questionable fit for the zone scheme fronts that some teams are running. But if you're going more zone scheme, then I think that Andrew Thomas may be a little bit better. But for me, I currently have Mekhi Becton as the better player. I think he's my number 3 overall offensive tackle, and Andrew Thomas, I think, is my number 5 overall offensive tackle. So I'm definitely a little bit higher on Mekhi Becton than Andrew Thomas. But scheme does matter.
Yeah. Now, David coming back in here, and he says that Maurice Jones-Drew just mocked CeeDee Lamb to Denver at 15 a few days ago. And I mean, if CeeDee Lamb's available, it's kind of hard to go against that. Now, our next mock draft we want to take a look at is Daniel Jeremiah, the NFL Network, NFL.com. He's also the host of Moving the Sticks podcast. If you guys get a chance to check that out, absolutely do. Him and Bucky Brooks do an amazing job on that podcast. Now, he has the Broncos taking Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama. And again, I mean, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Jerry Jeudy, it's like you never really know. It's just really kind of depends on your flavor. Jerry Jeudy might also be the best wide receiver in this class, and also is a really good complementary player to what we have with Cortland Sutton. Now, obviously, with Jerry Jeudy, you're getting an elite route runner, a guy with dynamic ability with the ball in his hands, especially after the catch. He's good before the catch, definitely good after the catch, and he's a little bit more explosive than I think people are giving him credit for. Eric, do you think that Jerry Jeudy can break into the 4.3 barrier at the Combine?
I wouldn't be shocked if we see him run somewhere just under a 4.40. And I mean, the speed that he shows on tape is definitely not highest end, but definitely of the higher end of it. And with his route running and his ability to adjust his speed throughout his routes and the burst that he has throughout him, just all that stuff, I would absolutely love him in the Pat Shurmur offense. And more, I'm a huge fan of CeeDee Lamb, but more and more that I think about it, more and more I go back and watch these wide receivers and everything, I start to think that the ideal wide receiver for the Broncos in this draft would be Jerry Jeudy, just because of everything that he brings to the offense. But CeeDee Lamb is still my guy right now, but I'm starting to lean that way a little bit.
Bawana Beast comes in and he's saying first off, let me just say thank you, Bawana Beast, for giving us the idea for this podcast today. It was because of your reaching out to Eric that we actually decided to go with this. But break down the top 5 tackles. You can't just drop number 3 and number 5. Eric, let's listen to your big board just a little bit.
So my top 5 offensive tackles are Jedrick Wills at number 1 out of Alabama, right tackle at Alabama, but I think he's going to have the potential to move over to left tackle in the NFL. He's got the power, he's got the feet, he's got the technique. It's just a matter of, at the Combine, some of those mobility questions are going to be answered. I think he's good enough with what I've seen on tape, but just getting some cemented numbers on those is going to be huge for him. Next up is Tristan Wirfs, who I think has the highest ceiling out of all the tackles in this class, and he is right there, more of a 1B than a number 2 offensive tackle. Very raw in his technique, but the upside is just outstanding. Mekhi Becton, as I talked about already. And then number 4 is Josh Jones. He's another guy, athletic upside. Some power concerns that I have with him, but the guy can move. He's not afraid to mix it up as a power blocker if need be, but there are some more concerns there. And just the technique is just a little wonky, but I mean, you're going to be wanting to work with him and develop him a little bit. And I just think that after what he showed at the week at the Senior Bowl, the progress that he made there, just on a technical basis, was just enough to be like, all right, yeah, this guy, he's definitely showing that he can learn and learn quickly to be a quick starter in the NFL. Maybe not need that 1 year break like originally thought it, which is what moved him up from, I think, was my number 7th overall tackle to moving up to my number 4. And then Andrew Thomas sitting at 5.
Now, Blake Williams, just to kind of continue this conversation, comes in. He says, I'm really liking the idea of getting Andrew Thomas with the 15th pick and trying to get Jalen Reagor in the 2nd. What do you guys think of the Broncos doing something like that? Now, I'm going to kind of take this off just a little bit and start us. Obviously, we just got done talking about Andrew Thomas. With Jalen Reagor, there's a very good possibility that he's not going to be available with the Broncos' 2nd-round pick. I've seen a lot of stuff with him going in the mid-20s, especially to a team like, say, even the early 20s, like Philadelphia. Philadelphia is so wide receiver hungry this year, and they are definitely looking for a top wide receiver guy, especially a guy that can be explosive before and after the catch, can create a dynamic receiving threat for Carson Wentz. Now, I don't know if Reagor would be potentially that guy, but Erick, is there any truth to the rumors that we're going to see Jalen Reagor go in the top 32?
I definitely think there is, especially with how much or what we see at the combine. The biggest thing that Jalen Reagor is going to show is how fast is he overall, and I think he's going to be in that 4.3 to 4.35 range. But for me, the biggest thing is the gauntlet. I want to see how he does having to run down that line, catching those passes, because the biggest concern I have with him are concentration drops. Yeah. I think that everything else is just fine with him. Yeah. And so I think that if he answers that, I definitely think that he would possibly rise up into the top 5 receivers, maybe even top 4 or 3, because the upside is just tremendous with him. And people say he's small, but he's built like a brick house, very well built, very well put together. And the speed, the quickness, the agility, the route running, all of that is very good. It's just the concentration drops that are going to be working. So if Denver wants to get him, I have a feeling that they would have to go after him either at 15 or moving down just a few picks, because I can't see him getting past maybe the Dallas Cowboys or the Philadelphia Eagles. Somewhere in that range, I could definitely see them going up for Jalen Reagor.
Well, and just another team that could potentially be looking for another wide receiver that can do kind of the same thing as the guy that they're potentially looking at releasing, Stephon Diggs is potentially on his way out of Minnesota. Do you think that Minnesota, if they do lose out on Stephon Diggs and get him out of there, do you think that Jalen Reagor would be a target at 25, I believe?
I definitely think that he would be, but I just don't see that he would actually be there for him. I think that at that range, also with what I've heard about the Minnesota Vikings, that potentially that they were going to be wanting to be fixing that offensive line that is a little bit lackluster and just trying to shore that up, because Dalvin Cook is supposed to be that focus point of that offense. They need to do a little better job of protecting Kirk Cousins, especially with this being his final year. So I think that wide receiver will definitely be an option for them. I think that the way that they'll end up going is most likely offensive line.
Okay. Now we're going to continue on with Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. There's a player that I know that you're high on, and I know that a lot of people in Dove Valley are extremely high on, in Javon Kinlaw. And now they have Javon Kinlaw falling all the way down to the Minnesota Vikings with Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. What do you think? Javon Kinlaw is such a freak of an athlete. The Broncos at 15, they're in love with the guy. He would fit perfectly in Vic Fangio's scheme. But to have Javon Kinlaw falling outside of the top 20, that's pretty rough, man.
It's not quite as severe as Daquan Bowers a few years, quite more than a few years ago out of Clemson, where everybody was trying to figure out why he was dropping when it came draft time, and come to find out that there was an issue with his knee. Well, with Javon Kinlaw, the word is that there is an issue with his knee. Not as severe as Daquan Bowers was, but just enough to cause teams to be like, maybe not just a top 20 pick, and might see him slip a little bit as a result. Just some pain in his knee that's just always been there, basically. So not sure what that is. The combine medicals are going to be pretty big for him and showing up what that issue is with the knee. But I still like him. I think his upside is tremendous. I think he has the upside to be the best defensive lineman out of this class. But it's just all going to revolve around, is that knee going to be good enough for him to get through the next at least 5 years to be a first-round pick?
Right. Now, to move on to our next mock draft, we have Chad Reuter, another NFL.com guy. He has the Broncos taking, obviously, the speedster Henry Ruggs with the first pick. But just to kind of break down a little bit outside of what the Broncos are doing there, he has Cole Kmet, the tight end out of Notre Dame, going at number 20 overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I do a lot of these mock drafts. I read a lot of stuff, and I try to just kind of get an idea of most of these prospects before I do my film breakdowns and everything like that. And Cole Kmet in the first round, this might be one of the few, if the only one, where a tight end in this year's class has gone in the first round. Erick, is there any chance that Cole Kmet could even break into the second round, let alone the first round?
I think that we're where we're looking at for a Cole Kmet to go is actually the second round. First round for me, anyways, is a little bit rich. I think he is, if I remember correctly, he's actually my number 2 tight end overall, or no, he's my number 3 tight end overall. With LSU's Thaddeus Moss being number 1 and Adam Trotman out of Dayton being number 2, so it's very bit rich for me to see him going that number 1 tight end spot, but I can definitely see the reasoning behind it, especially with the Jaguars, who are lacking that weapon at their tight end position, even though they did take a guy that I was very high on last year, and Josh Oliver, who I think can still be a very good fit for them, but he just needs to be developed. But it's just, I just don't see that a tight end this year is worth a first round pick. So this is one that is a little bit iffy to me.
Okay. Sorry, Stu McPeak comes in with a $10 donation on the super chat. Thank you, Stu. We do appreciate you, man. Good to see you again. The question I was actually going to grab here really fast. Javon Kinlaw, Henry Ruggs, and Mekhi Becton are all there at 15. Who are you taking?
Well, it's all going to come down to what we see about at the combine. If Javon Kinlaw's knee is clean up and you're going to be able to get through the next 5 years with him for sure, then that's the guy I'm taking. Henry Ruggs, there's been some rumors going around about him and his knees and their concern being there. So being a speedster, that bothers me a little bit more than Javon Kinlaw and his knee on the defensive line. Is a speedster's knees not so good because that's where a lot of defensive backs are going to be going with all the rule changes in the NFL. So it's a little bit iffy for me. Becton is out of the 3, Becton is the one way that I wouldn't go, but it'd be between Kinlaw and Ruggs, depending on what all happens at the combine and the medicals that come through out of that.
Okay. There was another one. Here we go. Yordi Lopez coming in on YouTube, and he says, is there a wide receiver the Broncos really like? Do you see them moving up ahead to like the Jets at pick 11 so they could jump ahead of the Raiders, who are desperately in need of wide receiver help? And there was a question coming up behind that to follow that up just a little bit. Would you trade up for Lamb or Judy depending on the cost?
Well, my thing is I am never a fan of trading up. Plain and simple. It's very rarely pans out in the NFL to trade up, give up additional picks. I am a very firm believer of the more picks you have, the more chances you have of getting hits. So that's just my stance on it. But if the Broncos decide that, hey, Jerry Jeudy is the guy or CeeDee Lamb is the guy, I could definitely see them moving up a little bit into that top into that 11 spot and potentially jumping ahead of the Raiders, who have been linked to Jerry Jeudy for quite a while now. And barring something where they were linked to, I can't remember which pass rusher it was at number whatever pick they had last year, and ended up taking Clelin Ferrell. Unless that kind of situation happens, I don't see the Raiders actually ended up passing up on Jerry Jeudy. He'd be tremendous for the offense, especially if they end up landing Tom Brady or one of these other veteran quarterbacks. So, well, I'm against trading up. If Denver feels that they have to go get one of those guys with having 12 picks, they have the ammo to do it. I would still be cautious about how much you're giving up, but I could definitely see Denver doing that.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, what if Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker out of Clemson, falls and he's still available for the Raiders at 11 or 12, whatever they have? Is that the direction that they could potentially go with them needing desperate help on the defensive side of the football?
I could see them going that way, and the simple reason for that is very similar to the reason why I can see the Broncos going with Isaiah Simmons if he manages to fall far enough for them to either move up and get him or just take him at 15. And the simple fact for that is Isaiah Simmons is just a freak. And if there is no one better in this draft to defend against the Chiefs offense with the RPOs that they run, with all the elements to it, than Isaiah Simmons, who can do so much for that. So if he is there for the Raiders at 12, I could definitely see the Raiders going that way, because it's going to come down to how much can you slow down the Chiefs offense and how many points can you put up. That's what the AFC West is at this point. So Isaiah Simmons is a tremendous fit for any team in the AFC West because of that.
Yeah, that true Swiss Army knife kind of a player. You can line him up at safety, the inside outside linebacker. He can line up on the edge, rush the passer. He's really good in coverage as well. Now Terry Randall coming in with a $5 donation on Super Chat. Thank you, Terry. We do appreciate you. # state of being. That's what we do, man. Now, to continue on with our mock draft discussion here, we're going to go on to the Draft Network here. And Jordan Reed is a very good follow. He's very smart and very good draft analyst for the Draft Network. If you get a chance to follow him, I believe it's at JReed Draft or something like that on Twitter.
I think it was Twitter.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think it's at JReed NFL Draft or something like that. Now, anyways, he goes with Jerry Jeudy there, and he also has kind of an interesting thing, especially with this wide receiver class as deep as it is. He has the NFL taking a total of 6 wide receivers in the top 30 picks, and Jerry Jeudy falls to the Broncos. Now, he has Lamb, Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, Laviska Shenault, and T. Higgins all going. Is there any possibility that we're going to see 6, or is that going to kind of, with just the depth of this class, are we going to see some of these guys kind of start to slide out of the first round?
I could definitely see either happening, just because I can't remember what year it was, but there was a really strong class at a position a few years ago where they just started flying off the board. Like, teams didn't sit back and wait on them. They went and got the top talents right away. But we've also seen it where they kind of sat back and waited. So I think with wide receiver, with the NFL going and evolving more to a very passing game, I mean, continuously doing that as it has been for the last 10, 15 years, I could definitely see a bunch of teams going with guys like, Lamb, Jeudy, Shenault, Ruggs, Higgins, Reagor, all going in the first round. But Brandon Ayuk is a possibility to go in that first round, depending on how he tests at the combine with the speed and the agility drills that he's going to be doing there. And then KJ Hamler and Justin Jefferson and Courtney Davis are 3 others that I wouldn't be shocked if we start hearing about first round buzz sometime after the combine with what they can bring to the table. So we could see them fall, but we could also see them go. It's very hard to say, just based off of what we've seen in history of the NFL draft, because we've seen both cases happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, I'm glad you mentioned this guy right here. What do you guys think of Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver, Arizona State, excuse me? He has good hands and pretty good speed. How do you guys think that he would complement Cortland Sutton, and would he be worth a second-round pick? Now, this is a kind of an interesting situation to me here, because if Ayuk is actually available for the Broncos in the second round, I think that it would be a very good complementary piece for Cortland Sutton. But it really kind of depends on me on like what the Broncos have done in the first round. Now, if they do get a chance to go get Jerry Jeudy, Ruggs, CeeDee Lamb, someone like that, Ayuk is there potentially available? I would rather have Jalen Reagor. That's just my personal opinion on it. But at the same time, if Brandon Ayuk is the guy that's available there, all those 3 are gone, and the Broncos take somebody like an AJ Epinesa or Javon Kinlaw, somehow Isaiah Simmons falls, or say they trade down and they go try to get, like a Christian Fulton, something like that, Trevon Diggs potentially. Like, if the Broncos don't go with a wide receiver in round 1, they are probably most certainly going to be going after a wide receiver in round 2. And Brandon Ayuk is a guy that they could be desperately looking at in round 2. What do you think?
Well, Benjamin Albright tweeted about a little bit a while ago about the Broncos looking at 2 wide receivers in the top 100. And that's been not directly stated to me prior to that, but it was kind of hinted at that the Broncos would be looking at 2 wide receivers early in the draft. And Albright went out there and he could basically confirm that the what I was hearing about it. And it basically, I could see Denver using their first round pick on a wide receiver and that second round pick on a wide receiver, but it all depends on who. If Brandon Ayuk is there at the second round, then yeah, he should be an option. But not if they take Henry Ruggs, not if they take not if they take Jalen Reagor. Those are the only 2 receivers where if we get them at 15, I wouldn't be taking Brandon Ayuk in the second round. Jerry Jeudy, I think that Brandon Ayuk, Jerry Jeudy, they bring a differing skill set to the Broncos offense to have a bunch of complementary pieces. Laviska Shenault, obviously a very complimentary piece just to any type of receiver, really, just because of what he brings to the table. And with CeeDee Lamb as well, any of those receivers, that he would be a very complimentary piece to it. But if they don't go get a wide receiver at 15, then yeah, like all the names you stated, Javon Kinlaw, AJ Epinesa, they could definitely double up or back that up with going and getting that weapon on offense. Brandon Ayuk, he has good speed, he has good hands, he runs not the best routes, but very solid routes. We saw progress get there or go through that as the season went on of him progressing with his route running. So definitely an option for the Broncos.
Now, Bill1293 comes in on YouTube and he says, not a draft question, but do you think the Broncos could move on from Todd Davis or a more versatile linebacker in coverage like Joe Schobert from Cleveland or someone else, something like that? I don't know. The cap ramifications alone, there's a little bit of money that you can be saved there with Todd Davis leaving. But at the same time, Todd Davis he gets a bad rap. He's a lot better in coverage than people give him credit for. And he's a hell of a run stuffing defender as the linebacker. Like, we need to kind of lay off on Todd Davis just a little bit. That's just my personal opinion. But Joe Schobert, he'd be a great piece to add in free agency. Obviously, the Broncos are probably going to go and look for a little bit of depth in the linebacker class this year. My boy Logan Wilson, you've got Akeem Davis-Gaither, that's one of Eric's guys. I don't necessarily think that Todd Davis needs to be moved on from, and it's really going to be more of a cap kind of a deal than an actual performance on the field. Now, Joseph Malinowski, excuse me if I mispronounced your name. Do you see the Denver Broncos moving on from Royce Freeman or using him in multiple trade deals? Eric, what do you think?
Well, I wanted to talk about the Todd Davis question just real quick before I get to this one. With Todd Davis I think that the Broncos could move on from him if we get some reassurance from somebody through some not so necessarily legal means of Joe Schobert or Corey Littleton or some other linebacker who can bring a little bit more to the coverage unit. That could see Denver moving on that way. But basically the biggest reason why Denver just needs to upgrade their linebacker unit and find a different starter to place next to Alexander Johnson is Alexander Johnson and Todd Davis are basically the same. They're good run defenders who can handle certain short zone coverages, but they both were exploited later on in the season when teams found out that, hey, just get them caught up on a receiver and they can't handle that, or a more athletic tight end and they can't handle that. It doesn't work. You need a more athletic linebacker to complement one of those two. Todd Davis, I would actually like to keep him around as a good depth piece. I mean, he'd be a tremendous number 3 linebacker behind Alexander Johnson. And as for with Royce Freeman, I don't see the Broncos moving on from Royce Freeman basically. And we had a question earlier about Isaac Yiadom, and it's kind of the same thing. Outside of them, completely falling flat on their face during the off-season programs, during training camp and all that stuff like that, I don't see them moving on from them basically because it's cheap labor. They're former third-round draft picks. You're going to give them another year to try and improve and develop a little bit more. Another year in the system, well, at least for Isaac Yiadom in the system, which can be a little bit of a complicated system for defensive backs to learn. So I don't see Denver moving on from either one of them this year, but unless they completely fall flat on their face during their training camp and then they just cut them.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Royce Freeman just a little while ago, and I think it was when we did our live mock draft a couple weeks ago, we talked about just the complementary skill set that Royce Freeman does bring, not necessarily as a receiver out of the backfield, but as a guy that lines up outside as a wide receiver, running quick slants and been playing in the slot. I think that he's still a player that the Broncos can find a way to use. And I mean, with the vision issues that he has been having over the last couple of years and not getting downhill and trying to bounce stuff outside, playing outside of his skill set primarily is the biggest issue for him. But I mean, in Pat Shurmur's offense, he could still be a useful chess piece. Now, there was another question that I'm going to try to find here really fast. Actually, hold on. We have another super chat donation here from Terry Randall, another $5. Thank you very much, Terry. Look at the Cardinals last year. No offensive line, but they loaded up on weapons for Murray and didn't do too bad. Thoughts?
Well, it worked for the Arizona Cardinals because of the type of quarterback that Kyler Murray is and the type of offense that they were running. And if you're saying with the Denver Broncos, their offensive line wasn't actually terrible last year. They definitely need more weapons to help out Drew Lock. There's no doubt about that. Cortland Sutton is a tremendous piece, but after him, there's just not much there. I know a lot of people are having faith in Deshaun Hamilton after the last 2 games he had, where he ended up netting about 43% of his total yardage in those last 2 games, which is great, but he was just so lackluster in the other games. Hands were a big concern, dropping a lot of passes, just a lot of issues there with him that you can't just hand him the number 3 or number 2 wide receiver spot.
And that's even after him getting a boost in reps with Emmanuel Sanders getting traded too.
Yep. He wasn't trusted with Brandon Allen or Joe Flacco. Yes, Drew Lock trusted him a little bit more, but it even took some time. There were 3 games where Deshaun Hamilton was barely targeted by Drew Lock just because that there just wasn't that trust there, and it took a while for that to be built up. So Denver, their line is a little bit better than people give them credit for. I think Pro Football Focus ranked them as the number 12th overall offensive line. They're a solid unit. I mean, they definitely can use a little bit of work. There's no doubt about that. I mean, no argument for me here. I've been touting that they need to upgrade their offensive line, but it's all revolving around the weapons. You got to improve there.
Yeah. David Cromwell coming in on YouTube. He says, if DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire are available in round 2, which of those 3 can you see the Broncos drafting? Now, to me, Eric, DeAndre Swift is a guy that I've been pounding the table for a couple of years now after watching him run with Nick Chubb and Sony Michel down there in Georgia. And I mean, he's very explosive, very good out of the backfield, catching the ball. He is the number 1 running back in the draft. I don't think the Broncos necessarily need to go in that direction in the second round. I think their resources could potentially be used in other areas. I think that, I mean, if you could get a guy in the 3rd or 4th, 5th round, somewhere middle of towards the tail end of day 2, early day 3, that'd probably be a better use of resources. But at the same time, if the Broncos have the opportunity to draft DeAndre Swift or J.K. Dobbins in the second round, that's a really, really difficult decision. So, Eric, what do you think?
Well, of those three running backs, I'd only be looking at DeAndre Swift or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. J.K. Dobbins, I think he's a very good running back, but I just don't like him for the Denver Broncos and what they want from the running back position. And the way I lean personally is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Don't get me wrong, I love DeAndre Swift, but I saw a stat the other day. I can't remember all the actual details of it, but it was just pointing about how he struggles to create on his own. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire did a lot better creating yardage on his own. So not as dependent on the offensive line. I like that. That's something that with the issues that Denver has had with their offensive line in previous years, that's definitely a huge boost for me. And then I just love what he can bring as a receiver out of the backfield. You can line him up outside, and this is by no way a comparison to him, but he can be used in a lot of the same ways that Le'Veon Bell was with the Steelers, out at receiver, in the backfield, just all that versatility. That's what you get out of him. And there is one question on here that I actually wanted to get to, and it is asking about why is nobody looking at the New York Giants? Usually when coaches come from a team, they bring players with them. Well, there's not many offensive line or offensive players from the Giants that are being available. There was somebody else that made a comment about Benny Fowler and Cody Latimer as free agents. It's pretty safe to say that Cody Latimer won't be an option for the Denver Broncos. Their parting of ways was not on the best of terms at all. Benny Fowler, I just doubt being brought back. I mean, the Broncos are trying to look to upgrade the receiver position, and Benny Fowler, as he isn't better than Tim Patrick, isn't better than Deshaun Hamilton. He doesn't upgrade the wide receiver room at all. The only free agent that I can think of on the offensive side of the ball from the New York Giants that might be of interest is that offensive lineman, Mike Remmers.
Yeah, Mike Remmers. Yep, the right tackle. Isn't he the same guy that got absolutely torched by Von Miller in Super Bowl 50?
Yes. And it wouldn't be for a starting job. I mean, the Broncos' depth at offensive tackle is bad enough that he would actually upgrade it and probably come as a cheap upgrade, which is the only reason why I'd be looking that way.
Yeah. There was another good question here, and it's let's see if I can find it really fast. There it is, from Yordi Lopez. He comes in, he says, do you guys think Bryan Edwards, wide receiver out of South Carolina, could move to tight end in the NFL?
I don't see the need to. I think that he is a very good X option for the NFL. I mean, his routes are a little bit better than people think. I wouldn't be shocked if he runs a little bit faster than we expect, somewhere in that low 4.5s, that high 4.4 range. I actually really like his game. I mean, he is a little bit lower than me just because the game is kind of going away from those style of receivers, but teams need those style of receivers even still. So I still like the skill set he brings at receiver, and I don't want to have to bulk him up another 15, 20 pounds and having him learn how to block like a tight end, all that stuff from the tight end position. I like him the way he's at and just using him if you're making him tight end, you're looking at him being a slot tight end. Just leave him the way he is and just use him in that kind of same way, just as a receiver. So I don't see the need to move him to tight end personally.
Okay. Now, before we kind of get out of here, guys, we're going to have to just a couple more questions. We're going to have to get out of here soon. So I want to just break into a different part of the conversation, especially around the second round. Now, today, like I said before we got started here, I got a chance to take a look at some of the cornerbacks that project in the second and third round. And there's one that I kind of brought up in our group chat with Nick and Carl, and his name's Bryce Hall, cornerback out of Virginia. Now, long, kind of tall, bigger-bodied guy, 6'1", 200, roughly, something like that. Good fluid and coverage, but there's something about him that just screams Kareem Jackson to me, and I'm not sure why. Now, with what I see from him is a guy that can go. He can play pretty much anywhere on the field, and he's really good coming vertically in the running game, and he's a very good tackler. Now, with the Broncos having Kareem Jackson under contract for the 2020 and 2021 season, and after this 2020 season, the Broncos could get rid of Kareem Jackson with a $3 million dead hit. Now, if the Broncos do take Bryce Hall in the second round, maybe third round, somewhere around in there, let's sorry about that. Let's just kind of envision this out just a little bit. If the Broncos do take Bryce Hall in the second round or third round, do you think that they might be able to slide him into that kind of hybrid safety nickel cornerback role and be the replacement for Kareem Jackson in 2021?
I definitely think they could, but I think that's kind of a role that they're looking at with Duke Dawson. And in the second round, I'm not sure I'm not high enough on Bryce Hall to do that. Even the third round is pushing it a little bit for me. The physical questions that I have with Bryce Hall, especially as a tackler, are just too tremendous to sit there and and be comfortable doing that. I do think that he does look better as a safety in the NFL, but it's going to take a couple of years to do that. I'm just not a big fan for him with the Broncos offense or with the Broncos defense. I mean, if we're doing that route, then 4th round, I'd be fine with it. But it's just a matter of when are you getting him to kind of make that switch.
Yeah, that's fair. And now to kind of continue with this cornerback conversation, what do you think of AJ Terrell?
I actually like AJ Terrell. I think that he is not the best tackler out there, but he's decently physical. He's got good technique. He's got good route mirroring, and he's just the technique can be. Technique is solid. I should say is the best way to put it. Definitely needs a little bit work there, and he got better as the year went on, which is the biggest thing to me. A lot of people are pointing to the game he had against the Clemson Tigers, or against the LSU. Sorry about that. And it's just, I mean, he's facing a guy who's projected to be the number 1 overall pick. He's facing 2 of the top receivers. I mean, 2 top receivers that are going to be in the draft. So it's just a little bit meh for me. But you can't overvalue the one game he had just because of how bad it was. You have to factor in just the type of talent he was. I like him in that second round. That's where I'd be looking at for him.
Okay. Terry coming back in with another super chat donation. Thank you again, once again, Terry, with $2. Eric and Lance Rock. Hey, we appreciate you, man. Thank you very much, man. Couple more questions. We're going to have to kind of get moving here. I got another one here from Bill, and he says, would you trade the San Francisco 3rd rounder for Calais Campbell or Akeem Hicks, and better chance the Broncos sign one if they were released? So I'm thinking what he's saying is to instead of letting Calais Campbell and Akeem Hicks get released or hit free agency, would you trade that San Francisco 3rd round pick to get him?
No,
I wouldn't do it either.
Now I would do their 4th, not their 3rd.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair assessment there.
Well, let me go into depth a little bit more about that. I would do the 4th for Calais Campbell. I wouldn't do the 4th for Akeem Hicks just based off the injury that he had and everything and a bunch of concerns there. But I would be stubborn and I would just sit there and be like, all right, if you're going to cut them. I'll go after them then. I'm not going to give up a pick for these guys. I'm going to be looking at the cornerback market if I'm going to make a trade with maybe AJ Boye or a guy who trading for him, you're actually going to get him cheaper than if he gets cut. With Calais Campbell, it doesn't really benefit the Broncos to trade for him or to wait for him to get cut because he's going to be about the same cost no matter what. Akeem Hicks, he might be a little bit cheaper if he gets cut than if you trade for him. So it's just that has to be factored in. So a 4th I would do for Calais Campbell, but for Hicks, I would probably wait for him to get cut if he does, and then just try and target the cornerbacks that might be on the trade market.
Now, you said a name that's kind of intriguing to me because I saw something on Instagram earlier today that the Broncos would potentially be interested in AJ Boye should he get released from the Jaguars. I don't understand why they wouldn't be like that. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of players that are going to be released, and the Broncos are going to be looking at a lot of cornerback. They definitely need some cornerback help this year. But if AJ Boye is released, he's going to be probably the best cornerback on the market. And if the Broncos are not interested, I'd be extremely surprised. Now, going back to the comment stream here, we got Yordi Lopez coming in again. Do you guys think David Reese from Florida or Errol Thompson from Mississippi State could be a good depth at middle linebacker or possibly start for this Broncos defense?
I'm not a big fan of either of them for the Denver Broncos. Basically, what you're looking at with them is what you're getting from Josie Jewell, Todd Davis, and Alexander Johnson. Good run defenders with very limited athleticism to handle widespread coverage abilities. So I'm not a big fan of them for the Broncos.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, Bawanabeast comes in, and I think he asked this question earlier. He's just going to do a repeat of this. How does Isaiah Simmons rank compared to last year's first-round inside linebackers like Devin White and Devin Bush? Who would you want the most? And I'm guessing he's asking if the Broncos had the opportunity to draft one of these 3 players. Now, to me, just with the Swiss Army knife ability that Isaiah Simmons has, his ability in coverage, the ability to move all over the defense and to play at all 3 levels, that's a more valuable player to me by far, especially with Vic Fangio running the defense. Now, Devin Bush had a really good year, and I tried to break it down a little bit. We talked about it at length on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast earlier this year. If the Broncos made a a bad decision by trading out of number 10 to go and get Noah Fant and let the Pittsburgh Steelers take Devin Bush at number 10 instead. Now, Devin Bush had a great year. Devin White also had another really good year as well for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Isaiah Simmons, there's just something about that guy that screams like all pro for years and years. And it's not just at the linebacker position.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't think linebacker is the best position to put Isaiah Simmons at. He's a defensive weapon. That is the best way to put him. He's very similar to Derwin James, who was used at safety, linebacker, slot corner. That just all of that. That is what Isaiah Simmons brings to the table. Devin White and Devin Bush, they're more of those true inside linebacker types. But if I had to put him at inside linebacker, he ranks higher than Devin Bush and Devin White both do at inside linebacker. I mean, both those guys, I think they were both. Well, I know Devin White was in my top 10. I can't remember where Devin Bush was, but Isaiah Simmons is my number 2 overall player in this year's draft. So wow, that speaks to how highly I regard him and his skill set and everything he can bring to a defense.
Yeah, that's actually extremely high praise. That's extremely high praise. Caleb Herman coming in and says, what do you think about moving down and getting more picks and then moving back into the first, giving us 2 first-round picks? So I'm guessing what we're saying is drop out of the number 15 overall to say the 20 area, get a couple extra picks, a second round, maybe a second and a third or something like that. And then jumping back up into the first round using 2 seconds or a second and a third to get to the tail end of the first round. Now for me, with the Broncos not necessarily in the quarterback market, that'd be kind of a hard pill for me to swallow. I do understand the want to trade out of number 15, especially if Ruggs and Judy and Lamb, Javon Kinlaw, Jay and Epinesa, those guys are gone. Maybe, the offensive tackles kind of fall. If there's an opportunity for a quarterback hungry team like, say, the New Orleans Saints or, say, the New England Patriots, the guys that have aging veteran quarterbacks that are potentially on their way out, especially with the free agency period looming with Tom Brady, Drew Brees potentially on the retirement side of things. Like, if they're looking up to go get, like, say, a Jordan Love, or they're falling in love with Jacob Eason, or, say, for some reason Justin Herbert falls, and they're going to give you a handful of picks to move back into the mid-20s, and you get an opportunity to go into the 30s and get like a Jalen Reagor or something like that, I could understand that thinking. But at the same time, it's too much of a hypothetical to really kind of break down accurately. So I appreciate the question, but at the same time, it's just so hard to know. It's so now, Eric, what do you think? Would you be willing to do something like that?
I mean, I've stated before that I'm not a big fan of moving up. I do like the idea of trading down, but it seems like the Denver Broncos, that they kind of want to push some of these 12 picks over into 2021 picks. So either, like, if they trade down, looking at getting a 2021 pick instead of 2, best way to put it is a later first round pick, and then a 2021 second round pick, depending on how far down they move, instead of getting like a first round pick this year and a third round pick this year and another pick this year, just going and getting that 2021 pick. So I can't see them wanting to move down, pile more picks up this year just to end up moving back up. And with my whole philosophy of not moving down is you especially don't move picks in the top 100 to move up. Is that those are the key pieces to help build your roster, especially with the depth in this year's classes. You want to keep those top 100 picks and use them.
Yeah, 5 top 100 picks. So there's a whole lot to work with here for the Broncos. And to move down, if you're going to get another couple to go into this deep wide receiver class, deep cornerback class, and potentially help yourself on the interior of the defensive line, sure, I could totally agree with that. But you've got to be, like I said, it's got to be kind of that who's fallen in love with the quarterback and they want to get up and go make sure that they secure the bag and secure their guy. So it's hard to kind of project something like that. But like I said, I mean, you've got New England, you've got New Orleans, and they're looking at potentially getting a quarterback of the future. So Joseph Malinowski coming out again, and he says, I don't know if you guys brought this up, but what about Chris Harris Jr.? Should we re-sign him or let him go? Because I feel he's on the downside of his career.
I would let him go. It's basically at this point, I'm not sure he's worth the money that he's asking. It's that simple.
What do you think he's going to be asking? $14-15 million a year to be a potential top paid cornerback in the NFL? If it's that, I don't know. The $12 million he's at right now, sure, that might be a decent deal, 2 or 3 years, and see how he continues to progress, and maybe move him over to safety. He's played some safety for the Broncos before. Like there's still some ability there, But I think you're right. I think that he is kind of on the downside of his career. Now, Brian Greenfield coming in with a donation on Super Chat. Thank you, Brian. We do appreciate the $5 donation. We appreciate you very much. You thought Devin Bush played great. I think I'm glad we didn't draft him. We got Fant and a much better linebacker. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that Devin Bush played great. And there was another comment that kind of said Devin Bush didn't really play, quote, great last year. But the guy had almost 100 tackles, and he still played. That showed that ability to move sideline to sideline, and the coverage ability for him is going to come back. I think he did have a very bad year in coverage. I mean, he allowed more catches, more yards, and more touchdowns to tight ends than Noah Fant caught all year. Like there is some issues in coverage there, but the athleticism the guy has, he's still very good at run defender. He did have a really good year. I'm not going to say great year. I probably misquoted that. Not a really great year, but he still did have a very good year.
Yeah, and also with factoring in Devin Bush's, we've spoken about this quite a bit on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast about Noah Fant and Devin Bush and if the Broncos made a mistake or not. And neither one of us feel like the Broncos made a mistake with passing up on Devin Bush. We definitely think that Noah Fant was the better pick. I think we both agreed that he had a better impact year one. It's just that Devin Bush, yeah, Lance did make a mistake. No doubt about that. He said great, and he didn't mean to. But Devin Bush, he had a good year. I mean, you don't pick up 100 tackles and not have at least a good year. It's that pretty simple. I mean, he had his issues in coverage, but he was very good against the run and as a blitzer. So it's kind of balances out, but it was a good year from Devin Bush.
It was. I mean, there's not anything wrong with getting 100 tackles. I mean, that's top 15 guy in the league. Like, calm down a little bit. Now, Yordi Lopez coming back in, and he says, speaking of Chris Harris Jr. here, Byron Jones or AJ Bouye in free agency? Should AJ Bouye be let go?
It all comes down to cost for me. I have a bunch of concerns about Byron Jones. I mean, he is a very good cover corner in the NFL, but he lacks good ball production that you're looking for. I mean, it's decent ball production. So I'm a little bit of a concern there. AJ Bouye, he's a big play. He's a shutdown corner, or at least he used to be. I mean, he did have a pretty rough year this last year, but he was dealing with a little bit of an injury that bothered him, and so it's all going to come down to cost. If Byron Jones wants a market-setting deal, then I'm moving on. I'm not giving him a market-setting deal. My max for Byron Jones would probably be about that 13.5 to 14 million on an average per year basis. I'm not wanting to go much higher than that for Byron Jones just because of the concerns I have about him. But AJ Bouye, I would trade a pick for him with his contract. I think that it's a fair contract for what he has. And Vic Fangio also likes to take corners that are past their prime and try and revitalize their careers. He did that with Prince Amukamara. He's done that with a few other corners throughout his career. So I lean AJ Bouye, but it really does come down to cost for me. I mean, if they can get Byron Jones for $12 million a year, I'm all for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, that's a steal. That's an absolute steal, because let's see here. Let's see if I can find it. There was a great comment right here. It says, Byron fits Fangio's scheme like a glove, and he can play some safeties too. He has the position versatility, a lot of pass breakups. There was a tweet that I had seen earlier today highlighting his abilities over the last couple of years. He's been targeted like 120 some odd times over the last 2 years and has only given up like 52% of receptions for less than 1,000 yards. And he has like 19 pass breakups. Like, there's ability there. There's a lot of ability to work with Byron Jones. It's just the cost is kind of the big thing. Now, we're going to get just a couple more questions here, guys. We're going to have to get out of here. One more before we kind of start wrapping this thing down and get moving out of here. Should we really trade for Stephon Diggs like the rumors are saying? Is it worth his money and baggage? Now, the other day on Facebook, I saw a comment that said Stephon Diggs is too much of a head case and there's not enough balls to go around. And if he doesn't get force-fed the ball or spoon-fed the ball, then he's going to be a loudmouth and he's going to be not necessarily what this team looks for. Now, we got to go back to think 2017 is the year. Pat Shurmur was the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs playing in this offense, this very same offense with Case Keenum throwing them the football. He didn't seem very upset back then, don't you think?
Yeah, this whole thing is that there's a lot more issues there going on in Minnesota that are making Stephon Diggs look like the bad guy. And from all the conversations I've had, that doesn't seem to really be fair for him. He just wants out of Minnesota. I mean, at this point, it's been a little bit of too much stuff. There's some issues there with Kirk Cousins, and it's coming from Kirk Cousins because these kind of issues were there in Washington. these issues that Kirk Cousins has with Stephon Diggs, you can see it there with Adam Thielen. It's not so much just Stephon Diggs. It's revolving around that quarterback they have. And getting him out of there, I think, is going to be very helpful for him. And, I mean, all the years of his career, we haven't heard these issues about him being a head case or causing drama. It's just been this last year where there's all these other things for it. So it's just, I think getting him out of there is going to be a huge benefit for it. His contract is, I mean, once traded, it's fantastic for the Broncos if they're to get it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that his cost to be traded for would be all that high, for the simple fact that the wide receivers in free agency and the wide receivers in the draft are so tremendous, and just it's going to drive that price down. I mean, why are the teams going to go give up a second or a first round pick for Stephon Diggs when they could just go and try and get like Laviska Shenault or Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb,
or Jalen Reagor,
or KJ Hamler or Justin Jefferson or Courtney Davis, or all these other guys that I can name off the top of my head.
Yeah, so, that you can get in that first and second round pick, and not only have them for a cost controlled on a rookie contract, they are going to be younger and probably suit better what the offense wants out of them. Now, Jordan Johnson coming in with a super chat. We're going to continue this conversation really quick. Jordan, we do appreciate you, man. $25 donation. That we appreciate that a lot. Thank you very much. Great show, Eric and Lance. Now, to kind of continue on with that conversation with the Broncos, and what did we see last year with Emmanuel Sanders? And it wasn't necessarily that he wanted out immediately, but there were rumors that he was kind of unhappy with his role and everything like that. The San Francisco 49ers, a contending team, went out and they gave up a third and a fourth round draft pick for a 31 or 32-year-old Emmanuel Sanders. If the Broncos can get Stephon Diggs for a third and fourth round pick this year, say, what is it, the Pittsburgh third rounder and then a fourth rounder this year, that is absolutely worth it. And not only for this, because he's a perfect complement to Cortland Sutton, and also the Broncos have like $80 million potentially in cap space to redo his contract and to sign him to a long-term deal before they have to then re-up Cortland Sutton in 2 years. Like, there's a good balance of getting a player that has thrived and had a lot of success with Pat Shurmur, getting him with Cortland Sutton, paying him on a bigger, longer-term deal, and then being able to still retain your young talent in Cortland Sutton to have that dynamic 1-2 punch. And then also have a guy like Noah Fant running across the middle of the field in this Pat Shurmur offense as well. Like, it's a great opportunity for the Broncos to not only upgrade the wide receiver position as a whole, but also upgrade the wide receiver position over the course of the future. Now, go ahead. Excuse me.
And also, just to add to that is, yes, Diggs is under contract for 4 more years, but Denver can go and just basically give him a new deal. They can tear that one up, give him a new one, and just basically just have it right for the next 3 years where all the money is, and then potentially move on from there. And also with that whole factor is sometimes teams prefer to go and get a player on their final year of their contract, especially if you're a contending team like San Francisco was. I've seen a lot of people saying that, not in the chat, but over the last week or so, that why would the Vikings take that Sanders was on a 1-year deal and he got that. Why? Well, San Francisco 49ers have a little bit more cap issues than the Vikings do this year. And additionally, is they were a team that was trying to contend. 49ers at this point, they may not be. And also, just one last thing about Stephon Diggs and all that is the issues of him wanting the ball. He doesn't want the ball all the time. He wants to be looked at when he's open. And Kirk Cousins had a big issue of Stephon Diggs being wide open and dumping it off to the running back. And with Drew Lock, we might have some of those instances, but I think that they would find a way to get Stephon Diggs involved a little bit more often.
Yeah, with Pat Shurmur, with the way that he used Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen a couple of years ago, that was just too great. Now, this is going to be our last one before we get out of here, guys. Brian Greenfield coming in with another super chat donation, $2. Thank you very much, Brian. We appreciate you. Won't Darius Slay be better than AJ Bouye or Byron Jones? Ooh, that's actually a pretty good question.
Yes. Darius Slay is a top 5 corner in the NFL. I don't think AJ Bouye or Byron Jones are top 5 corners in the NFL. The issue with Darius Slay is, if I remember correctly, he's on the last year of his deal and he's wanting a huge extension done, which Denver has all that cap space. They have a rookie quarterback on that rookie deal. So it's easy to deal with that and handle that contract extension. No issue for me. Darius Slay is, I think, one of the most underrated and best corners in the NFL. and he's just a tremendous joy to watch. He's one of the guys that every year when I'm scouting prospects, I always go watch NFL players who are at some of the best at their position and just watch what they do, how they do it. And Darius Slay for cornerbacks is always the guy I go to. Absolutely love his game, and I would love to see him in Denver.
That's actually kind of an interesting piece of information. I appreciate you for sharing that. Now, the one thing that I do want to kind of bring up with Darius Slay, there were rumors, and I'm not sure if it was more rumor or if there was actually kind of some truth behind this, that the Broncos were interested in trading Chris Harris Jr. to the Detroit Lions for Darius Slay, and there was some more stuff that was going on with that. So Darius Slay potentially being a Bronco has already been discussed. Like that's not where there's smoke, there's fire.
It was before the trade deadline, and the issue is if I remember correctly, the Detroit Lions wanted the Broncos' second-round pick this year to go with Chris Harris over for Darius Slay, and the Broncos, they wanted to send either a third or a fourth round, and there's just an issue there, and they just weren't able to get it done. But yes, that was being talked about and discussed between the two teams.
Awesome. All right, now, guys, we're going to have to get out of here. Thank you all once again for joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast, again, on live. You guys can follow us both. You can follow me at Sanderson, MHH on Twitter, and for Erick at Erick Trickel. Notice the CK right there. You can follow the show at DVDD_pod, and you can follow the podcast network at Huddle Up Pod. Make sure you guys go on to Apple Podcasts or iTunes, wherever you guys get your podcast information. Give us a quick 5-star review and just voice your opinions on how we're doing. Like we have a great interaction with you guys on the show. We answer all your comments, whether they're good or bad. I mean, we've had a couple of decent ones, but I mean, it's just a lot of fun to be able to talk Broncos football with you guys. This is what we do best. I mean, this is what we're passionate about. And if not for you guys, we wouldn't be able to do that. So once again, guys, thank you all for joining Dove Valley Deep Divers. Oh, yeah. Also, before we get out of here, just quick pieces of information. We are moving to Friday nights, 5:30 Mountain Time. We're moving to Friday nights, 5:30 Mountain Time. Make sure you guys are ready for that. It just helps us open up for the weekend just a little bit and gives everybody else a chance to enjoy their weekend a little bit better.
It's better for our scheduling of me having a daughter. I have to find somebody to watch her. Friday nights is just the easiest. That's where we're going to be moving to. We were going to do it this week, but with it being Valentine's Day, we had to hold off and put it on until night. But yes, 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on Fridays going forward. And we have a very special guest coming on Friday the 28th, I believe is what it is, 2 weeks from yesterday. So yeah, the 28th. He is a current college coach. I believe he coaches running backs right now, or maybe receivers. I can't remember which. But he's going to be joining us for that. And so you guys definitely make sure you're for that. We're going to get a lot of information from him about what coaches look for in players specifically to fit their scheme and how they measure all that. That's what we're going to be getting, guys. So thank you guys for joining us. And yeah, we really hope you guys are there for when the coach joins us.
Yeah, it's gonna be a heck of a good show, guys. So stay safe, take care. Y'all have a great night. Thank you very much.